Hello, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Kevin Poorman. I'm a developer advocate here at Salesforce, and today we're going to pick up where we left off last week. We're working with our metadata-driven trigger handler framework. And if you recall, we developed this metadata trigger handler inside Apex recipes. And that's great and wonderful and a powerful example. But you don't want to have to install all of Apex recipes just to use this particular trigger. And this is true of some of our other bits of Apex recipes as well. So in the past, what I've done is I've taken and extracted those bits of code out into their own repository, their own package, and put them out there for people to use, say, just the metadata trigger handler or just safely. As an example. So today we're going to pick that up. Last week we copied and pasted and moved everything over from Apex Recipes into its own Salesforce project, its own repo. We got that up on GitHub, and now this week what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working on automated packaging and putting together a README and doing some of the CI goodness that makes our example apps, our example code repositories really shine. And to do that, we're going to start off with literally picking up where we left off last week. You'll remember I was struggling to figure out a way to make it so that this bit of code was also covered. Because if you would look at our code coverage here, I've got mid-80s code coverage, and while that's legal, I'd like to provide a little bit more code coverage if I could. So as I look through this and look at the stuff that is not covered, I've got an exception, and I've got a return, and I've got this constructor. And I was trying to think about a way, when I get code that's hard to test, I feel like I've done something wrong. And so I was trying to figure out what we might be able to do in order to fix this, make this testable. And this would be a great point where this would be a great place if Apex had optional parameters. I could just say metadata trigger service MTS equals new metadata trigger service like this does. But we don't have that. We have method overloading in Apex. So one thing we could do is we could go down the Fluent rabbit hole. Now, if you've never used Fluent interfaces before, I'm a big fan. What they are is they allow you to say, metadata. I'm going to make this a comment so that everyone understands that we're dealing with. Okay, fine, whatever. Then we can say something like we could create it so that our interface looked like this. We could do metadata trigger handler dot get instance dot like that, and then we could do dot we could do get instance. We could do then set MTS TS instance like that, and that would get us most of the way there. But the question would be, how do we call that get instance? What you do is we would set the constructor to automatically do this, and we do that. Let's go ahead and implement this. I'm just gonna, for grins and giggles, we're gonna implement this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say public static metadata trigger handler, because we're going to return an instance of this object. Get instance. It's going to accept nothing. We're going to do this. We're going to return new metadata trigger handler like that. Now you'll notice we're going to call this constructor. But we don't want people to be able to use this normally, so what we'll do is we'll make this private. So now we have a private constructor, and we're going to call that private constructor, and then we're going to return it. Pretty simple. Now we can also do public And this is not going to be a static method. It's going to be an instance method. We can do set. We'll do metadata trigger handler because we're going to return the exact same thing. And we're going to set this. There we go. And we're going to say this MTS is equal to our MTS instance. We're going to return this. Perfect. I love the way GitHub Copilot just sort of did that for me. That's really, I like that a lot. So if we save this, okay, and we're going to have to change the way we call this in our unit test. So let's go look at our unit test. Now I've done some cleanup and I've created a classes folder and we put all of our classes in here, but then I also have my test classes in a separate folder underneath it and a test helpers to put them there. And the reason I do that is just to make sure I can find things easily. But the key takeaway I want you to have is that it doesn't matter what your file system organization structure is. When you go to push and pull source code, it's going to push and pull that regardless of your local hierarchical file system. It's going to put classes into the right classes bucket inside Salesforce, etc. So well, you can look at our metadata trigger handler class, tests class, and let's go through here. Look up at the top, test metadata trigger handler, no op with records positive. That's a mouthful, but okay. So we're going to stub out our metadata trigger, and we're going to have our new metadata trigger handler, and in this case we're passing in our stub. But this is the way our API is changed. So what we actually need to do is now we need to say metadata trigger handler dot get instance. Okay, and I'm going to then I'm going to make this a little easier to read. I'm going to do this, get instance, and then I'm going to say dot set MTS. And for my MTS instance, I'm going to, whoa, hey, what are we doing here? Put this in here, my new stub. Okay, because I don't need that. There we go. And I don't think I need that either. There we go. Set empty. Okay, that's going to be that. And then this is going to be, make that way. There we go. I'm going to save this. So now we're calling our getInstance method, which is going to call our constructor. So we get test coverage for that. And then we're going to call the override just after it, which is doing the set MTS. Now, our set MTS method, if we think about this, is probably perfectly valid to have this set MTS private, but test visible. Because if we look at our metadata trigger handler here, do we ever want to let somebody override the set MTS? I don't think so. So what we're going to do, we're going to say private, and then we're going to make it at test visible. Save that. Now, we've only fixed one of these unit tests to use the new syntax, but they should be fairly similar to do it. And if we go rerun our unit tests, we can refresh that and rerun it. While we're running our unit tests, how about everybody chime in with where they're tuning in from? We usually have a lot of people in India and a couple from Africa. Let's see where we got people today. Uh-oh, we had a failure. Let's see what this is. Class metadata trigger handler tests. Okay, I'm not entirely sure. Let's, here we go. Trigger new and trigger old are both null. Are you exercising this method outside of a trigger context? Oh, well, that was not the test that I expected to be running. So let's focus now on refreshing. Well, let's just do this. I'm just going to rerun this test. Uh-oh, that failed to run. No positive. Metadata trigger handlers. Set trigger context after context is true. That should be fine. Well, I'm going to devote like maybe 5 more minutes to this before we get to packaging, because that's honestly more interesting. Okay, so this is failing. We are turning this. We are not covering the set MTS. So that's going to get us our stub. And we're going to set the trigger context. Well, so here's a fun thing about the fluid interface. We could refactor that line away pretty much. But why are we all of a sudden... So if we undo what we did here, was this unit test passing before? Let's test that. Because by my calculations, that shouldn't have broken anything. Let's run that test again. Okay, so that passed. So the question is, why does this break if we call our get instance and set MTS methods in a fluent style? So maybe we had a syntax error. So I'm just going to comment that out. And we'll do metadata trigger handler. MDT handler is equal to we're not going to do new. We're going to do metadata trigger handler dot get instance. No parameters there. And we're going to say dot, and we're going to do set MTS, and we're going to do parameters like that. Not parameters, we're going to cast that stub generate to an instance of metadata trigger service. And then we're going to run the run method. So this isn't using any data, this is just running. And if we go to our run method here, run. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is validate the run. And validate run comes from trigger handler. Validate run, saying is if the trigger is not executing and if the context is null, trigger handler calls outside trigger execution. Was that what our... Let's see what our error message is. Because I'm pretty sure that was the error message we were getting, but let's double check. Failed to run. Trigger old and trigger new are both null. It's not there. It's not in that one. Trigger old. Metadata trigger service exception. Oh, because we're in the metadata trigger service. Okay, get us object type. So over here, we did this one to be stub generate. And if we do this, hey, Patrick O'Sullivan's tuning in. Good to see you, Patrick. Okay, so this is what's happening is because we're just creating this in our metadata trigger handler, our object here is going to get created. That's fine. But when we try to go run this, it's going to immediately get the S object type. And that S object type is what's failing. So if we look at our get S object type, which is down here at the bottom, we're saying trigger new is null, trigger old is null, then throw an exception. Hey, look, we got a misspelling. Let's fix the misspelling. Maybe. Spelling suggestions. There we go. So in our metadata trigger handler, if we call a new one and we don't have the S object type listed, it's going to automatically fail. So what we need to do is find a way to inject in our metadata trigger service our object type. And if our object type is, where are we using object type? Oh, we can pass in the string. We have that available. So if we do test get metadata triggers, because we're overriding that. So if we no, we can't do a static. We can't dependency inject a static. So let's think about this. We could override the object type and just return that object type down here. If the this dot object type is set, which would be true in a, we'd have to write another unit test to capture the negative side of things when we expect this to occur. But this is we're having tech issues? Huh. I wasn't aware that we were having tech issues. What kind of tech issues are we having? Okay, new tech issue. I've lost my mouse cursor. There we go. You know you have too much screen real estate when you've lost your mouse cursor. I'm not seeing any reports of tech issues. If there are some, please let me know. Okay, so as we stream through this, I gotta find a way to get the S object type from 144p issues. Patrick, I'm not sure I understand. I'm sorry. It's probably my undercaffeinated self that's causing that issue. But the simplest path forward would just be to allow this to be overridden. So I'm gonna say, let's just make sure. Is everyone? Can you let me know in chat if you can hear and see me? Okay. I'm not seeing anything wrong. Let me check in with my minder here and see if things are okay. And then we're gonna 144p. 144 people. Okay. 720p. I am broadcasting in 1080p. That's interesting. Not sure what's up with that technical glitch. I'm gonna keep going. So, method declarations. And, oh, okay, fine. You want me to put this up here? And we will save this, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to code this method Is that a static variable? No, it's not. So what we'll do is we'll do private static test override object type. And that's going to be a string. And then I'm going to come down here and say if test override object type is not null, return test object type, else. No, I'm not going to put an else because then it'll be like, you're not returning a thing. So we'll put that in there, and then that will let me do this. And when my trigger metadata handler, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say metadata trigger service. I'm going to have a method that sets the get instance, return new metadata trigger handler, which is going to call this, which is going to fail unless there is a hard-coded default already. No. Nope, that's not true. Because it's static. So what we can do is we can say our metadata trigger service dot. I did make that static, right? This is public private static. Oh, it's not test visible. Okay, make that say account. And saving. Let's see if this, I think this should pass. Yes, okay, that passed. Okay, so we go over here, you'll see that we don't cover this, because we don't have a negative test for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone this test, clone this, and I'm going to say negative, no op without records, negative. I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to rewrite this to be test dot. I'm going to do Boolean did catch proper exception equals to false, and I'll do try catch exception. It's going to be this is a metadata trigger service exception. Oh, look at that. Metadata trigger service exception. And that's got to be fully qualified. Okay. I'm going to do MTSE. I don't like single variable ones. Okay. And what I'm going to do is say down here if mtse.get message dot equals or contains ignore case, and we're going to say are both null, then did catch proper exception is true. And then down, I'm going to take this out, we're going to stop test, and then we're going to assert equals, we're going to just do assert, and the assertion is going to be did catch proper exception, and we're going to do that, and put a comma there, and we're going to expect to have caught an exception without overriding object type. Okay, so now we've got more flexibility in the way we do this, and I'm going to run all these tests. Ruh-roh. Failed to run. Not again. Let's see, which one? Yes, but didn't I catch that? Okay, so this is our negative test. I'm gonna get rid of that. And I'm going to say metadata trigger service. Let's just copy and paste this in case I have some kind of... That's correct. Contains ignore case. Are both null. Why did we not catch that? Oh, because it's not on run. It's going to be on this. Yep. It's going to be on instantiation. Boom. I love it when I eventually get to the right answer. Save that. Okay. Is using static set ID, set records ID, or static map a good way to handle recursion? Manjeet, that is a way to handle recursion, and I prefer to do it with a set of IDs before other things. But in this particular case, with our metadata-driven trigger handler, it's built into the trigger handler. The way we've done it in our trigger handler here, you've got the you've got max loop count. And so this max loop count here is going to handle preventing our recursion for us. So don't typically have to worry about that too much here when you're using this particular framework. So let me rerun this test. Run test. I'm going to clear my screen down here. That worked. So now if we run all of our tests, we should see some better code coverage. 92%. Our metadata trigger service, on the other hand, only has 63%. So you win some, you lose some. Okay, what's not being caught over here? We don't have one of those where it's returning the object type. And the reason we don't have one of those that's returning the object type is because why? Because we're not calling the other constructor. So we also have the other constructor over here that takes this particular one. So let's do that again. We're going to clone the test. If I can copy and paste. And we're going to do that. And do I? No, because it's covered. So why is our metadata trigger service has 63%, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 get metadata triggers. We don't actually need to call that. Oh, we do. Because we're doing that down here. I feel like that's... Let's check that. Because are we maybe missing some other... Oh, I only ran those tests. Let's run all the tests. Okay, I need some coffee. There we go. Much better. See? I like that. There we go. We've improved our test coverage some. So let's go ahead and talk about packaging. Now, one of the things that I really like about the way we have our sample app set up is that we have sort of automated packaging going on. And we do this with GitHub Actions, and we're going to do that again. Now, last week when I did, one of the things that I copied over was the actual workflows. And so you can look at our CI workflow here. You can see that it's going to use, these are the works we're going to do. We're going to format our things. We're going to run our unit tests, and then, excuse me, we're going to run and go and run our org unit tests and all that jazz. But we still have to do some setup here. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this up to create a package. And so our metadata-driven trigger handler, we don't have a package set up. So if we go up to our project JSON, you'll see there's no packages listed here. Now I'm going to open this file, but I'm not going to edit it directly. I'm going to use the terminal to do this. And I'm going to do sfdx force package create, and then I'm going to do -- name, and you'll see that I'm cribbing from my notes from when I did this before. My terminal will keep this for me. Package create name is going to be metadata driven trigger handlers. And you know what, now I've lost all the rest of the stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my other notes here, and then I'll put in, let's do a description. Descriptions are good. And we'll say a trigger handler that utilizes, uses, I can spell uses, that uses custom metadata to determine what and when to run. This package only requires your trigger to contain enough logic to start this trigger handler. The rest is driven by metadata. Woot. Okay, and then I'm going to put in package type is equal to unlocked, and path is force app, because it's everything in that force app directory we want there, and no namespace is equal to true namespace, and I'm going to do target. Let's see, what do I have to put in for target? I forget. Oh, it's my target DevHub username. DevHub username, all one word, and I'm going to put in yeah, I think that's it. Oh, I have an unbalanced quote some here. No CLI autocomplete. I don't have CLI autocomplete in my Visual Studio Code terminal because I broke it. But yes, I should have that there. Let's see here. Unlocked path. Why did it go to quote? Because it didn't like the ending. It did not like my exclamation point quote. So we'll just do single exclamation point. Okay. Package type is all one lowercase word. If you're curious, I use Warp as my terminal. So if I come over here, this is my normal terminal, and Warp is really cool because it'll give you like metadata trigger, gives you really cool autocomplete down there. So we can do that, and then every time you hit enter, it becomes like its own thing up here. So I could even like copy that command or share the output of it with the Twitterverse, etc. But when I ran that command, you'll see what it did is it created this package directories clause in my SFDC project JSON. It's going to say metadata driven trigger handler. That's the name of my package. Package name, version number. Here's the name of my package. No namespace. We don't want a namespace. And it's going to give us the package alias, which is that ID. Okay. Now that has changed that file. So let's go over here and make sure that gets committed. And I've got a whole bunch of other changes here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do updates to file hierarchy and new package set up in SFDX package JSON. and I'm gonna add all those and commit that. And I'm gonna go ahead and sync that change. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. And when I sync that change, it's going to send all my changes back up to GitHub, where we've got this set up to run. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on the README. And I'm curious, since you all are here, like, what do you want to see in a README? Like, what about a README makes you go, I want to use that or I don't? Because I'm curious. I really want people to adopt this framework. I spent good amount of time developing it, and I'm just vain enough to say I want you to use it. So how do I, like, what about a README file do you want to, what is it that really grabs your attention in a README file? Is it pithy sayings? Is it like I can get my dog to review it? My dog will say woof, and then I'll translate to, best code ever written there in the thing, but this is the default README, obviously not what we really want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start us off with the README from Apex Recipes. So what I'll do is I'll do github.com Apex Recipes, and I'm going to look at the README. And the reason I'm going to copy and paste from Apex Recipes is because I want some of these badges and that sort of stuff pre-set up for me. So let's look at this raw. And I'm going to copy pasta that, and we'll come over here, put this in place, okay, and we'll just scroll up here to the top. Now, I happen to know that our CI workflow badge is not under this recipe, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this bit, and I'm going to look for, and I'm going to replace that with, this is, where did we put this? We put this in Developer Force Metadata driven trigger handler. So I'll copy that and go back over here. I'm going to put this in there. We'll just change all of them. There we go. So we've now tied this to github.com developer force metadata driven trigger handler actions query workflow packaging. Okay, great. So all of those should work. I'm really not gonna like put this all in all at once. I'm going to write these here in a little bit. So Alitan is saying, for me, I'm usually interested in seeing what the package does. Say a link to documentation as well as an easy way to set it up and use in the README file. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to make a very generic table of here, but I am going to leave some of this in so I can show you the power of our CI setup. What we're going to do is we're going to do set up your environment. Yeah. I don't need to do that. The Apex recipes. Where's the playground? I don't need any of this stuff, I don't think. So developer edition org or the CLI. Yeah, we're going to take it out of a Scratch org, because if you're doing this, you can figure out how to do it in a Scratch org. Set of instructions. Okay, so we're going to sign up there, clone this repository. We've already changed this to developer force. We've done all that. I love the power of copy and paste. And we don't need to... Well, I guess... Okay, so we're going to do this. Apex recipes. We don't have a permission set or sample data or execute anonymous script or that. Okay, and actually, you know what? I did the wrong thing. It's not Apex recipes I want to look at. It's github.com code fryer safely. Okay, did I forget the name of my own repository? I did, didn't I? Can the user. It's called can the user. Yeah, there you go. Let me look at this repository. Here we go. This is the one I want. Okay, because I've got the installation bit here and the package link. So I'm gonna redo that. Come on, get to my README, and we'll look at the raw. And just Get rid of all that. We're going to do, this is going to be, it's going to not be can the user. Code fire can the user. We're going to replace all of those. Okay. And we'll change this to be metadata driven trigger framework of awesome. And I'll fill that in later, and I'll say can the user, it's going to be metadata trigger framework with an R. There's our badges, contribution. We'll make sure that we've got a code of conduct and contribution. Installation, you can deploy the metadata driven trigger framework. And we're going to do SPM install. We'll get to that in a second. Okay. And we're going to change this to metadata driven trigger framework, which is a mouthful, but it's descriptive. We've got our package link. You'll notice that this URL is a fully qualified URL, and it's got a specific package version, and that's okay. That's okay, because this is going to be magically edited by our CI stuff in order to always point to the package we just created. So what we'll do is I'm going to change this to be, I'm going to replace for can the user safely, and replace it with metadata trigger framework. Okay, do I not have, I've got and I'm gonna get rid of all of these checks because I don't need any more of them for this, and I'll fill out this README here in a little bit. We got to put that README in there, and this is the important bit that this package, because every time we generate a new package in CI, that URL has to change. So we've got some stuff in our CI setup to do that. We're going to look at that here in a second, but I want to make sure that link is here in this. And then what I'm going to do is look and see if I've got anything more. I did my, okay, let's go look at our GitHub stuff. We've got a customize the workflow in GitHub workflows for CI. And the thing we've got to do is look for the path for source. So let's look at source. We don't have a source there. That's interesting. Let's do changed path. Oh, no. Okay, so we don't have to worry about force app. It's the default. So that's there, because this is what's looking for what's changed in the Git diff, and we want to be able to say we only care about things that have changed in the Git diff that are in my force app directory. So if our prettier configuration file changes, that's okay. We're not going to run CI. We're only going to run CI when we have a change to things in the force app folder. And then I'm going to look for we've got to create some JSON here, and that's in our packaging. So let's look at our packaging YAML. And all this, by the way, all these YAML files that go through and do all the steps to create a package automatically, put together by my wonderful colleague Philippe Ozil. You should tune into his stuff and watch attentively. He is a ninja master at doing this kind of stuff. And one of the things he told us to look for is to look for this line and change the name of the package. So I'm going to look at my package definition, SFDC project here, and you'll see that my package alias, I'm going to copy that, go back over into my packaging YAML, and where I've got my JSON command, JSON equals blah, 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 I'm going to change Apex recipes to metadata-driven trigger handler so that matches. This should match whatever alias I've given my package in the SFDC project JSON. For some reason, that was a mouthful. I'm just going to scan for Apex recipes. I don't have anything more there, so that's good. I'm going to save that. And then I've got there's one last thing we got to do, and that is to go into the repository and, go the wrong way, and the GitHub repository, and we have to set some secrets. Now, I've already done this because, as you might imagine, they're secret, but I want to show you how. And the way you do it is you do new repository secret, and then it'll ask you for what you want to call it. These are the two that we use in our CI and packaging stuff. Specifically this devhub sfdx URL. This is the login URL you need in order to go and create a scratch org so that you can run the unit tests. But like I said, I already filled that out. So the great part about this is, like, no one can ever see this. It's just there in the CI environment on GitHub, and I can use those variables, and I can use them by referring to in my packaging or CI. Let's look at CI. What I can do here is I can say, where's my push source to scratch org, and you'll see that it's going to grab my dev hub. This is my secret right here, and actually this is the one that does it. It's going to grab secrets.github .devhub_sfdx_URL, and it's going to write that to a file so that I can use that file in creating a scratch org. And it's all super secure. Nobody can see that. Not even I can go look at what that URL is. I can only update it if necessary. But once we've got that in there, we should be able to look at it, and we've got a couple of changes here. We've got our README change, and we've got our packaging change, and I'm going to commit both of these, README and packaging change. And cancel. Let me hit the button. There we go. And did I have to change anything in ci.yaml? I don't think so. And so if I sync changes, this is sort of the nerve biting part. So I've synced my changes, and if we go back to my repository and I look at the code, I'm going to look at actions. And it's running my README and packaging changes CI. Here we go. We're going to run format my. You can see all the steps that we're doing here. So we're going to install the npm dependencies, and it's going to start the Apex processor for Prettier. That's the local server. It's going to make sure that all the stuff is formatted properly. Oh no! Oh no! Okay. Code formatting verification with Prettier failed. Let's see why. Failed at meta-driven Prettier Apex script. Does it say why? Exit status 1. Well, let's just try to run this locally. So the first thing we're going to do is go back over here to our package JSON, and you'll see that we've got Prettier verify Apex local. That's what's running. That's what that Prettier verify Apex local. That's what npm is trying to run here. So let's do this. Boom. Oh, wow. Some errors. Let's look at what those are. Yay. Okay. Okay, so it couldn't connect to the server. Is that what happened in our... It doesn't tell us what happened here. And I don't have access to that log. Okay. So if we look at our... We look at our package JSON. Prettier Apex local. How do we just set that up in Apex recipes? Let's go look at, because we just changed this. So let's do GitHub. And we'll go into the GitHub folder for this one, workflows. We'll go into CI. and we're going to do format lint LWC tests. That's the one we were working on, format lint LWC tests. And the first thing it's going to do is go run our okay, so do we have those same things here? Start local Apex parser server. That seems to have worked. We've got those steps. And then stop that. I wish it told me what failed. What we're going to do is we're just going to go in here. We've also got prettier Apex. Now we're just going to run prettier instead of prettier, or we're going to run prettier verify and not do it locally. So if we go into our CI here and we're going to look for run Apex tests, we're not there yet. We're looking for run the parser for prettier. And so instead of doing that, we're just going to run prettier verify. And I'm going to comment this out. There's few enough here that I don't know that that makes sense to start the local server. So we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to do the line by line. If you're wondering, like, what does he mean by the local server? Prettier for Apex has a couple of options, one of which is to fire up a Java instance for every file. That's the default. So if you've got 5 class files to go through, it fires up the Java for prettier server once, then a second time, then a third time. Alternatively, you can say, no, wait, I don't want to spin up all those instances. That takes too long. What I can do is I can spin up a local server and run that. But I want to see if this is going to work, because the logs I'm getting in GitHub don't tell me whether or not it's a local server issue or an issue with an actual file. Converting to non-local server. We'll commit that, and we'll push the changes. We'll go back over here and look at this. And to do that, I'm going to go to Actions, Converting to non-local server. Now we have to wait for our turn to run this. Okay. Running npm CI. Okay. Now we're going to run prettier. Verify. Maybe. Okay. So we still have an issue with something, but it's maybe not our local server. So let's go back over here, and I'm going to run the exact same thing, but I'm only going to run prettier verify. Let's see what this says. What are we getting an error on? Okay. Okay, well, let's just open up that log file and see what's going on. Okay, so we're doing this one. Okay, we're getting a status. Failed to execute the prettier verify script. Args. I'll confess, I'm not sure what's going on here. Event emitter. Okay. one of the things that I may have accidentally modified is the prettier. I don't see anything wrong with that prettier. So why would prettier run prettier verify? Let's just do run prettier. Okay, so this is actually modifying our things. Let's see if it's gonna... Okay, so no errors there. It seems that we've modified 5 files though. So maybe it was that it was just finding differences. That's what it was. So I have some formatting differences. And you know, before I do that, I'm going to go back in here and undo my local server usage. Add that, commit that, save, push. Let's go back and look at our code actions. Fixing our formatting. I'm going to work on the error message that comes out of that, because that is not that's not intuitive. Like, I didn't go, oh, I get it, I knew what to do to fix. So let's see if we can't get this to run once before our time runs out. And so we're starting the local server. We're waiting for the server. Code formatting verification. It's not immediately dying, so I feel better. Oh, that passed! Look at that. Oh, lint lightning web components. Lint lightning web component. We don't have any lightning web components. Yeah, I think that's the issue here, is that we don't actually have any lint lightning web components to lint, so I'm just going to take it out. Removing LWC linting. No LWC. Push, change. Waiting, waiting, waiting. Here we go. I wish there was a way to like have an image that already had my npm dependencies there so that I didn't have to install them, but that would create sort of this version hell nightmare of every time an npm version changed, I'd have to go recreate the image, etc. Okay. Okay, so we've passed everything so far. Post checkout source code. Okay. Now we've going on to our scratch org test. This is going to push all of our code to the scratch org and run our unit tests. It'll also run the Salesforce CLI scanner against our code base. This is a version of PMD that'll tell us if there's something drastically wrong with our code here. I don't expect I have PMD installed in my Visual Studio Code instance, so I don't expect that it's going to find anything that I haven't already addressed. But this is good to have a check here. While we're doing this, anybody have questions, comments, snide remarks on what we've done so far? Uh-oh. Rule set is not found. Okay, so I don't have my rule set file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say cp apex recipes. I hit enter too early. I'm going to do apex recipes, and then I'm going to do rule set, and I'm going to drop that in here. So now I've got a rule set. I'm going to commit my rule set. Save. Okay. Now, if you're familiar with PMD, you know what a rule set is. If you're not familiar with PMD, rule sets are the set of rules, the name, it's there in the name, that it's going to look for, and how it's going to give weight to things. And so we use a standardized rule set across our sample apps, and this is the way, that's that rule set file that defines it. So we're going to have our, it's going to do our code formatting. Again, we shouldn't find anything different, right? Nothing has changed here except adding that rule set file. Now we're going to go on to the scratch org test, which is good. We're waiting for this to come around and set up the job. Install the Salesforce CLI and the CLI scanner. Now you may be thinking, why don't I do this in like a pre-commit hook? You could do a lot of this in a pre-commit hook. The problem is anybody who has a copy of the repository could disable that pre-commit hook and then commit. And so if they did that, they could bypass this. And so what we want to do is we want to put our checks in place at a place where people can't override them. Okay, so you just see it. Created our dev hub URL, authenticated the dev hub. It's creating our scratch org. Maybe creating the scratch org. And there we go. Created the scratch org. And it's going to push my code. There we go. Run my unit tests. This is the big deal. I'm loving this. Okay, here we go. We're going to delete the scratch org. That's good. So we've done all that. Now we're going to publish the docs to the wiki. This is going to give us documentation of all of the classes that we've set up in the wiki. Okay. My personal access token failed. Are we not going to trigger this check was skipped? Swift docs. I think that's the wrong thing. What is that doing? Authenticate. Publish docs to wiki. Swift.org publish. It could not find my GitHub personal access token. Oh, that's because I have the wrong one there. What is my token? My token is repo access token. I think I can just do this. We're going to set that there. Resetting token ID. Sync that change. And once more into the breach. Look at this. Come on. Here we go. Okay. Now we're going to go to our scratch org test. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I know we're running a little bit over. I'm gonna cut this off as soon as this finishes for good, and then I will tweet about what we did here in a little bit. I just want to make sure we get one good run out of this. Because once you get one good run, it's automated, unless you break a unit test. And that's sort of the glorious part of this. I can go in there and I can update something in the metadata-driven trigger handler package, push my changes up to GitHub, and the CI will run. It'll say, okay, your unit test pass, and then automatically generate a package for us based on this. So if we get to the end here, you'll see we're pulling our Scratch org information. We're going to push our source to the Scratch org. After creating the Scratch org. Okay, created it. Now we're going to push. There we go. There we go. Okay, so our Scratch org is done. Now we're publishing our docs to the wiki. This will be good. Come on. No whammy, no whammy, no whammy. Okay. Grab that. Check out source code. Yay. Let's see. It's telling me I don't have my bot file. My bot URL does not have the right permissions. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut the stream off, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit my secrets so that this will work as intended, and we will you'll be able to pick it up here later this afternoon. You can always check out what we're doing and see the code for this, see how it's working here on the Developer Force Metadata Driven Trigger Handler repository. You can see that we've got CI failing, unknown code coverage, etc. And so we've got that set up here. I'm going to turn the stream off now so that we can continue working on this, but I can edit the secretly. So thank you very much, and I'll see you all next week. Feel free to tune in on Thursdays, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, and we'll see you then.